for joining us for our first joint meeting. I'm just going to share my screen. Start the slideshow. Can you all see the PowerPoint now, Cesar? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is our first joint meeting for the ATI Advisory Group and Working Group. And for those of you who have not joined one of our online advisory group meetings, these meetings are open to the public and they are being recorded. We have only promoted advisory group members and working group members and SANDAG staff to be able to speak, to facilitate those business items at our last advisory group meeting. We did have extra time at the end, and we did allow individuals to raise their hand and share other feedback and comments. So we are definitely open to that if that time allows outside the agenda. For those individuals who are on the advisory group or the working group would like to speak, please raise your hand. And if you agree to what another member is saying, you can use icons to share this approval. And please note that we value opinions, but we may need to move conversations along to ensure all the meeting topics are covered. In terms of our meeting agenda for tonight, I'm going to be starting out with a review of the scope of the SANDAG ATI study and addendum opportunities. We've had a lot of feedback about interests in areas that were outside of the original scope for the project. And so we just wanted to review that. Andrea Pella with the county is going to be sharing an overview of the working group and what they've been doing even before this project started with SANDAG participating in it. Octavio Rodriguez is going to be presenting advisory working group efforts and what they're doing. And then we have Dr. T from HHSA Behavioral Health Services sharing care coordination and data sharing, which has been a big topic the ATI advisory group has been talking about the lack of data and how do we do a better job sharing data. And then we dedicated the last 50 minutes of the meeting to have open discussion between the advisory group and the working group. So Octavia will be facilitating that discussion, but we look forward to some good dialogue there. So just moving into the scope of the project. So there, again, the Board of Supervisors asked us some very specific questions to answer in this one-year study, which we did get a 3-month extension on. Part of that was looking at jail population data and how it changed pre-COVID to during COVID, and we've completed that analysis. Also looking at individuals who weren't booked into jail during COVID and what was their ongoing contact with the system. Looking at the needs of this population, what services are available and where gaps and barriers may exist. Doing a best practice literature review to understand what proven programs or promising practices might be out there that the county should consider. And then doing a cost analysis of looking at what the cost for different alternatives to incarceration would be. And then throughout that was a community engagement and feedback. We've tried very hard to put it out there to have an advisory group to have meet with us, provide feedback, and Octavia will be talking more about that participation. We've also enabled individuals to get on our website and share comments at any point in time and to put those in all of our reports. And we also had community forums, and we'll be having 2 more. We just recently completed our 3rd interim report, and this will be shared very shortly with the advisory group and the working group. This shows the different research questions that I just presented to you. And the dark black circles show which questions have been completely answered, which questions have been partially answered, and which questions we are still working on, and we'll be sharing as much information as we can in our next report, which is going to be due in December. And this PowerPoint will be on our website after tonight, just so you know. So there's still 4 significant remaining research tasks that remain. And I'm going to be providing a quick overview of each of those. The first is looking at the criminal justice contact of individuals who weren't booked into jail. This originally started out with having a matched comparison group, but it was a lot of overlapping populations. So we did a scope change there. So we're looking at individuals who had law enforcement contact between April 1st, 2020 and March 31st, 2021, which is our during pandemic period, for drug use, possession, or public conduct. And they were not booked into jail. So what we're doing that's unique is we're taking a population of data, which is over 15,000 cases, I believe, looking at those individuals in ARGIS and merging that with our hub data from the county to see who was not booked into jail. And then we're going back 12 months and going forward 12 months to better understand the type, frequency, and timing of justice system contact for those individuals. And some of the research questions we want to get at are, how many law enforcement agencies did they have contact with? Was it a field interview? Was it an arrest? Were they booked into jail? Was it all the same type of charges? Were there different charges? So we're hoping that we'll be able to compile a lot of information that individuals haven't looked at before and provide actionable information to the county. We're also doing a best practice literature review, looking local, state, national, international. Again, we don't want to endorse any one program, but we want to look at what's proven and promising based on research that could either be a program or a policy. We're linking it to the Intercept model, and also want to share information about specific populations when we can, and also share information about, again, the best practices with the county about the importance of fidelity, for example, and without, again, specifying a specific program. The gap analysis really got started when we did our survey of the community, and we do have some data there on needs of clients, and we have supplemented that with other data sources. We are looking at barriers to clients, and we did a service provider survey, which some of you helped us distribute, so thank you. We got about 60 surveys from that, looking at both what barriers might exist for clients as well as service providers, and also trying to look at what's the best way to engage clients. And then finally, our cost analysis. We are not doing a cost effectiveness because we don't have individuals going into a program where we know what happened to them afterwards. It could say this much money would, if it was invested, would result in something else. But we are going to be looking at a sample of individuals who had the same drug and public disorder conduct charges, but this time pre-COVID, when they were booked into jail. And we're going to follow them through the system and see how many days in jail these individuals were, come up with a cost for that, and then assume that those same individuals in the future, again, 1, 5, 10, 20 years out, what would have happened if they'd gotten one of 9 alternatives? And so we're going to assume the entire population could have gotten that. These include PC 1000, which is a diversion program that involves going to treatment, sobering centers, crisis stabilization units, pretrial services, 2 collaborative courts, behavioral health and homeless, the DA's Community Justice Initiative, outpatient treatment, and residential treatment. So that is the scope of the study. We still have a lot to do to get done in this time period, but again, it's really focused on a certain population of individuals, looking at what's happened to them pre-COVID, during COVID, and hopefully provide additional information for the county as they're moving forward. So Andrea, I'm going to stop sharing if you're good to go.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, just one second. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, give me 1 second. Let me just. Okay. So hi everyone, my name is Andrea Pella. I'm the Director of Prevention, Diversion, and Reentry. I'm working on this project with Cindy very closely. I usually attend your meetings and the advisory group meetings, that is. And so thanks for having us and for suggesting this joint meeting. I just really quickly wanted to kind of tell you who was on the call from the working group. We have, oops, I'll kind of go through here. We have Seon, who's from Office of Medical Care Services with Health and Human Services, Nicole Esposito, who is with Behavioral Health, Kathleen and Flannery and Holly Porter, who are both with the Public Safety Group, Rachel Solov, who is with the District Attorney's Office, Angie Law and Natasha Robertson, who are with the City Attorney's Office, Matthew Wechter with the Public Defender's Office, Patricia Ceballos with the Sheriff's Department, Mika, I hope I'm saying your name right, I apologize if I'm not, and Melissa, who are with Office of, oh gosh, I'm going to get it wrong, Office of Equity and Racial Justice, and Jorge, who is with Probation. And then we also have Officer Grubbs, who is with SDPD. I think he just hopped on, I think. And hopefully I've been able to promote everybody. So I just wanted to welcome them. They are here, and they are part of our larger working group that has been working on this project since, most of them since December of last year, early January of this year. So what I wanted to do was just quickly kind of go through what we've been working on. What we did in about July was we broke our working group down into smaller groups based on the intercept model. We broke it down into groups 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. So there's 3 groups. Not everybody from the larger working group is a part of those intercept groups. They may have sent other members of their department to participate, and some of those members are on the call tonight as well. So thank you to them for being here. And then not every agency is in each intercept group. It really depends on if their agency would be involved in that particular intercept and the discussions that we have. So before we get started, I know there's been lots of questions about what's the purpose of the advisory group versus the working group. And so way back before the advisory group was created, this is what I had shared with the working group when they wanted to, have clarification on what their purpose was, which is to provide context for data collected and analyzed by SANDAG, review program and service recommendations, and evaluate alternatives for defined populations. So that is the purpose of the working group. They are frequently providing Cindy with feedback, just as you are, related to the data that they are collecting or have collected. And so they're able to give a different kind of perspective based on their agency, what agency they are with. And then I just wanted to share sort of the common goal amongst both the working group and the advisor group, which is really ultimately what the board is asking us to do, is to provide recommendations for services and supports to the board for purposes of future investments that will safely and permanently reduce the jail population. So I just wanted to highlight that for us before I kind of dive into the other few slides that I have here. So for intercept group 01, the goals that we have there are strengthening prevention, finding alternatives for people in behavioral health crises other than jails or emergency rooms, booking alternatives for low-level misdemeanor drug and public conduct charges, and understanding clients' needs for housing. As it relates to the discussions we're having, we've been talking about sobering centers. We have different subject matter experts reviewing the data related to sobering centers, and we collected data from the 2 sobering centers that we have in San Diego County, one in central San Diego and one in the northern part of San Diego and Oceanside. We also looked at booking data for those who maybe should be going to the sobering center, but instead are being booked into jail. And those are charges like drunk in public or under the influence of a drug. So we looked at that data, and we're also looking at EMS data as well to further our understanding of where else, are the hours of operation, do those make sense? Do those need to be expanded for the sobering center? Do we need more staffing? Do we need other locations for sobering centers? What is the need? That's what we're trying to determine. And so we actually this week will have this intercept group will get a presentation from one of the subject matter experts who's been putting this data together from behavioral health. So we will be talking more about what is the need, what can we recommend in this area, if anything. We also have been talking about booking alternatives for low-level misdemeanor drug charges and public conduct charges. And what we're getting at is if somebody is not in a mental health crisis, where if they were, they would maybe be taken to a crisis stabilization unit. And if they're not under the influence of a drug or alcohol, where again, they might be taken to a sobering center. If this person maybe, isn't in one of those situations, where else can they be taken? These are folks maybe who maybe are mentally ill, but they're not in crisis, who maybe also, or, are drug users, but are maybe only in possession of drugs at that moment in time and are just, maybe hours away from getting high. So what can we do to help this population? Where can we take them? And so one of the things that came up in our last meeting was looking into LA's no wrong door model. And we're going to talk more about that in our upcoming meeting. We haven't gotten to really dive into some of these, but we also are discussing reentry services for those booked and released or in custody for less than 10 days. So trying to capture folks who are really spending a very minimal time in custody and being released. How can we assist them and provide services that they need? And then lastly, understanding the needs for housing. We know that there's a great need for housing, but what is it that folks really want when it comes to housing? We hear often that they don't want shelters. So if they don't want shelters, what is it? And how do we figure that out? So that's what's going on in Intercept 01. In Intercept 2-3, the goals there are to increase participation in collaborative courts, increasing meaningful referrals to collaborative courts, and decreasing time in custody. And what we've talked about there is an earlier screening process to decrease time in jail. Embedding persons with lived experience in the jails is something we've just started talking more about, but understanding there's a lot of limitations with that, and trying to identify what are those limitations and is there a way to work around those limitations. This is kind of a newer topic that we've just really started to scratch the surface on. If not a collaborative court, is there a different option for something equally as structured and evidence-based that somebody might be interested in participating in? And then conducting outreach. So what we think would also be helpful is advertising the collaborative courts, even in things like newspapers where family members might read about it and be able to motivate their loved ones who might be in custody to advocate for a collaborative court if they haven't been offered one, or to motivate them to want to participate in a collaborative court. We thought about maybe posting information in high trafficked areas in the jails, handing out brochures at the time of arraignment, different things like that would get people starting to, learn more about collaborative courts from the beginning, and hopefully building that interest up by the time they get to some of their court dates where there's negotiations on their cases happening. Intercept Group 4-5, the goals there are reducing recidivism through strengthening reentry planning and services, and strengthening connections to community services from release. There we have, we've been talking about probation uses an assessment tool called Compass, and we've discussed with them looking into updating that tool to take into account things like implicit bias, racism, things like that. Probation is having internal talks and discussions related to that. So we hope down the road we're able to make a recommendation if that's appropriate related to that tool. It's also it's a tool that that is also relied upon by the sheriff and the courts at times as well. So other partners are involved in those discussions as well. Identifying needs of clients leaving custody and expanding reentry planning. So really trying to figure out what are these top needs of clients that are leaving, how can we expand the reentry planning to make sure that we're able to help each client. And the sheriff, it does a lot with the reentry planning, so does probation, and so does the public defender's office. And so who are these folks that maybe we're not capturing, and what are their needs? Or even of the folks that we are helping, are we really able to meet all of their needs? We've also talked about something called the Transitions Clinic. We are still looking more into that, but that's the use of peers as community health workers. They ideally would go into the jail, work with the client before they get out to help them engage in healthcare. But in addition, to engaging in healthcare, they can help them engage in other services this person may need. And so it's this idea of, again, using peers to engage our clients and help them take advantage of services, build that trust, build that rapport. And then lastly, something we really have not gotten to dive too much into is an idea of potentially a like probation review court pilot, which for those who maybe are familiar or not with mandatory supervision court, that's a particular court that people can be placed on mandatory supervision and they go to court at a certain frequency determined by their sort of the plan that is developed for them with by the sheriff's counselor and shared with probation. And they're not just going to court because they violated, they're going to court just to check in, to be held accountable, to make sure the other parties involved in this are held accountable in assisting the clients in success. And so discussions came around, what about doing something similar for our high-risk high-need probation population? And again, haven't gotten to talk too much about that, but that is something else we will discuss and determine if there's a need there and if it's a recommendation we want to make. So those are the things that we've been discussing in these intercept groups. And thanks for the time, Cindy. Appreciate it.
I'm just unmuting right now. Oh, I was just looking at the attendee list while you were speaking, Andrea, and if the Lynn on the call is Lynn Carr, I know you're on the working group. I just want to make sure that we promote. And then I wasn't sure if Marla is Marla Kincaid. So
yeah, you some of the folks here are also on the intercept group. So if you want to, I can promote some of them too. I'll do that while you move on to the next piece. No problem.
Okay, it's Octavio's turn, so I'm going to share the presentation again. And so just let me know when you want to me to move ahead for you, Octavio.
Yes, thank you very much, Cindy. Well, now we're going to talk a little bit about the what we've been working with the advisory group members. As you can see in the screen, we have currently we selected, or a panel selected 14 members to become part of the advisory group for the ATI project. And we have been working in different ways with them since the beginning. If you can go to the next slide, Cindy, please. So in general, the advisory group was created to provide with input and recommendations on some of the research updates that we provide. While the advisory group did not make final decisions on the content of our research, SENDEC has been exploring different ways to incorporate their recommendations and feedback, and some of them we're going to talk in this section. If you can go to the next slide, Cindy, please. So some of the activities we've had with the advisory group since April 2022 has been various public meetings. We had advisory members joining the community forums that we had in June, and some of them provided important feedback and recommendations on our community engagement and our community surveys. Participated and actually had the chance to see the surveys before we released them, and provided with some important feedback about it. Starting on August, we were looking at the possibility of having the advisory group much more engaged and involved in the process, in the research process with SENDEC. The advisory group wanted to have much more presence and much more engagement. So with the suggestion of a few of the members, and based on the results that we had from community surveys, we created subgroups to start discussing specific topics in a much more reduced settings, and to focus the discussions towards very specific recommendations that we could take into consideration in our reports. We initially formed 4 subgroups divided in different categories. Initially, we had best practices, future research, disparities, and law enforcement. As we continue to meet with the advisory group members, we consolidated the groups into two larger groups. And if you can go to the next slide, Cindy. So now we have two concentrated groups, one on best practices and future research, and one on disparities and law enforcement. And different members of the advisory group have been participating in this in these different groups. It's not a membership, so they have been participating, some of them in both, some of them in only one, depending on their interests and their expertise. If you can move to the next slide, Cindy, please. So we've had a total of 9 subgroups meeting so far, and we've had the majority of the advisory group members participating in some of those meetings. Among the relevant issues that we have been discussing in those groups are some practices that would have been beneficial before an arrest, based on the life experiences of many of our advisory group members. We also have discussed successful social enterprises, such as the case of the Lancy Street. We have focused on disparities created by systemic issues in the criminal justice system, and some of the barriers for implementing changes in the system. One of the outcomes from these discussions is that the advisory group was interested in authoring a piece or some form of addendum to the final SANDAC report, just to provide some of their perspectives from the point of view of their experience in the field. So that's been our work for the last 3 months with the advisory group, and I know we're going to have some more comments from them as we start the discussion, the conversation with the working group. Thank you very much.
Okay, so then now we have Dr. T, who'll be sharing his screen.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, everyone. I have the pleasure of knowing some, but not all of you on the advisory group. And I'm here today, you see my title there, but and this really, really long title slide, but a wordy title slide, but really we're here to talk about this May 10th board letter that came out and was unanimously approved by our Board of Supervisors, that really complements the work that we are doing in ATI. And so I'll get into it. And I have about 7 slides. This should be no surprise to none of you. We all know that there are significant health disparities in general when you're talking about justice involved, and particularly incarcerated individuals. So, and that we have to be mindful of. And we know that if we can do things like improve care coordination, data exchange, where possible, because we know there's a lot of rules and regulations we also have to work within, then we could improve, or that gives us the potential to improve individual outcomes, operations, evaluations, and strategic planning. One way to think of it, or that I like to think of it, is that even when you think about your own organizations, if you had all of your teams in separate silos and not sharing information, not sharing data for planning, programmatic care coordination purposes, right, you would not be maximizing the potential that we have to use to, better, more effectively work as an organization, but also serve our clients. So we're trying to do that on a much, much larger scale. And just like ATI, this is, an effort that involves a lot of countywide entities, not just in county government, but also external, as I'll talk about in a little bit. So when we think about these 2 initiatives, we wanted to talk about just really briefly about how they work and how they kind of collaborate and complement each other. So this is ATI, what we're all obviously familiar with here. And then with through ATI, of course, there's many opportunities that are afforded to us, many that I'm not even capturing here, like Octavio just mentioned, especially with the advisory group, but in the subgroups and the sequential intercept model groups that Andrea was talking about, what we're doing in some of those is like doing, as she mentioned, utilization analyses, looking across the map and with currently available data to see, okay, where do we see gaps and needs? But the challenge is that when we look at this data, this is data that we have to separately pull, that's not routinely run, for example, on a ongoing basis, and we only have limited types of data available. And this is not a surprise. This is something that I know many of you have been working on probably for decades, before this conversation even started. And there has been, of course, much progress and work, I want to acknowledge that many of you have done on this. And so, there's, but at the end of the day, currently there's a limitation in terms of what data we have access to, who has access to it, in what timely manner, and then, and how we access it, right? And how we manage this, how do we govern this type of data? So then this board letter, the May 10th board letter, came about to really help us talk about that challenge and really help develop a data governance, client level data sharing infrastructure to support things like care coordination, planning, operations, and evaluation across the sequential intercept model. And this helps address these challenges that some of you have identified while working on this ATI effort. And then, with these data, we want to also be able to look longitudinally and really do a lot, more thorough analyses or assessments of kind of things like utilizations and needs, and then further, do planning, strategic planning, and identify gaps, et cetera. So that'll feed into, the alternatives to incarceration work going down, right? And then when we think about when you look at the May 10th board letter, that came about, I've heard that, in the February report back for the ATI work, it was mentioned that there was some of these data related challenges. And then so District 3 did come back on May 10th with this board letter. And these are kind of the main recommendations that are taken from that board letter, as you see here. Develop a proposal and plan to advance data management, governance, integration, county programmatic data sharing, regional community information exchange utilization, regional health information exchange utilization, and then come back with a report on potential opportunities and challenges at the local, state, and federal levels, including but not limited to policy, funding, legal compliance and regulation, and infrastructure, right? So that's something that we're going to be reporting back to the board at 270 days, which is coming up in February. And then at a year out, we have to come back to the board with a proposed data management structure. So that's also another comprehensive report. And then kind of an ongoing ask or request from the board is to pursue funding opportunities related to this work. And they specifically called out what's called PATH, Cal AIM Justice Involved funding. And so we have received PATH Round 1 funding, which allows us to look at how we are sharing information and data around Medicaid enrollment eligibility between detention facilities on the adult and youth side with our Health and Human Services Agency, and specifically our self-sufficiency agency, or our eligibility operations that enroll people in programs like CalAIM, CalFresh, Give Cash Assistance, et cetera. And so we got that initial funding to look at that process or those processes in much more detail, and then apply for round 2 funding, which helps actually fund some of the solutions that we like to propose to the state. Okay. So as you've heard, this is kind of a very large project that involves many stakeholders. And so this is not something that we could do overnight, just like many of the things that we are all working on. This is the way that we are kind of approaching this effort. And so you see here, the blue squares are what we're calling the current state, or the as is, right? So before we can go forward and think about solutions, we have to first just make sure we really know where are we right now in terms of our data sources, whether they're county, internal or external, non-county data sources, in terms of our data governance, what are the regulations and privacy laws that we have to be aware of. Where are we in terms of data sharing and integration currently? So we have to do that as an assessment before going forward and really being able to make recommendations based on where we are, right? So that's that process that we're doing right now. And as you see, these 3 of these boxes are pretty much wrapping up, and we're summarizing those for this upcoming 210-day report back to the Board of Supervisors. But some areas are, of course, taking longer. And one example of that is the non-county data sources, where we are working with many external partners. Like, for example, the Regional Task Force on Homelessness, who has their HMIS data system database. And so we want to capture information about, where are they, how do they fit into this, what types of data do they capture, do they actively share or not share, and with whom, et cetera. And so that we kind of do our complete and thorough landscape analysis. That said, there's always room for improvement. There's always more we need to do, and we're trying to do as much as we can now. But of course, I think we will definitely be building on this as we go. And then another way to look at the timeline is that May 10th was when this was approved. In 90 days, we had to come back with the report back. We did that. That is public. I'm happy to share a copy of that. With you all. And then now we're working on this 210-day memo. And after the 90-day memo, we're trying to go to as many groups that we feel are kind of stakeholders, and we really want to make sure that we're running this by folks and getting their opinions from. And a good example is the Behavioral Health Advisory Board Criminal Justice Subcommittee, where I'll just actively call out Darwin and Andrea have given good feedback and others have given good feedback that we've taken in, incorporated, and then acted on, and that's things like engaging certain community groups more, thinking through and thinking with certain different perspectives, or bringing up use cases for us to think about, et cetera. And then, of course, we welcome any feedback and all feedback from you all. And then in terms of timeline, the next few things that you see on our horizon is the 210-day report back, which is really going to summarize a lot of the efforts to date and some of those groups that are closing or closed in terms of the as-is situation. And then and that'll help prepare us for a 270-day report back, which will really get into the opportunities and challenges. That'll be pretty interesting. So this is a start of this conversation. I want to say that, we are, because this is complementary to the ATI effort, we're more than happy to come back as often as you'd like us to come back to talk about this. Maybe a good time might be before the 270-day report or after that. And as seen in the board letter, this is just language literally lifted from the board letter. Right? The board letter recommendations ask us to take this initial step towards data integration and improved management, and really set up this infrastructure for the county to work on this kind of shared population of clients, across multiple agencies and departments, et cetera. And that includes, from law enforcement to health plans to social service providers and government entities, et cetera. So, and then this is, of course, just a start, and like I said, we're first just trying to figure out what the as-is state is before we move forward. And we are coming up with things like use cases for our 270-day report. We're coming up with a few of those. And just to really kind of solidify the need for this type of data, integration and sharing, et cetera, to help with these types of efforts and improve the quality of our clients' lives, as well as, operational efficiency and planning. So I'll stop there and open it up to any questions.
Thank you so much. We're right on time. And so what I wanted to put out there is to see if Octavio, maybe Andrea, would like to facilitate an open discussion. I'd love to do introductions, but I don't want to to waste any time with that. So if when we have our speakers, if you could just identify yourself, the agency you're with, or any background that you want to share with the group. And I see that there's 2 panelists' hands are up, and that includes questions for any of the presenters or just open discussions about the project. So Octavia, you ready to take it over with Andrea?
Yes, I will. Andrea, then Bill.
I'll let Bill go first. He had his hand up first.
Oh, then Bill, you go first.
All right, first I had to figure out how to lower my hand. Thanks for the information about the, oh, by the way, my name is Bill Payne. I'm the CEO at Second Chance here in Southeast San Diego. Thanks for the information about the data exchange framework. Can you provide any insight on how that effort at the county level is related to the California HHS data exchange framework? I know you and I had some emails back and forth, but I didn't know if you had looked into that a little further.
Yes, thank you, Bill. And I'll also acknowledge Bill for just being a outstanding kind of a contributor and just sending kind of FYIs to Amelia and I around things that we might find interesting as related to this project. So he did flag that at the state level, as some of you may know, AB 133 is requiring this data exchange framework go forward to reduce some of the silos across the healthcare, and I'm defining healthcare broadly, system in terms of data exchange, et cetera. So even though recently they are not talking about justice involved, individuals, they're really talking, they have a first tier of folks who have to sign some agreements and really are going to be first to start sharing data. They have use cases that they have shared in public documents, and I can put that in the chat after, where one of those examples is a justice involved individual going through the system and transitioning through different systems, and how there's all these challenges, whether it's Medicaid or whether it's just information flow, et cetera. So I will say that it feels to me that we are further along than they are at the state. But we are monitoring that conversation at the state, just in case any of that applies to us. We do have people, we actually have Dr. Kaiser from San Diego County, who's on the advisory group, or I might be saying the wrong name, but one of their main groups at the state. So he's helping to facilitate any needs that we are identifying up to the state as well. But so far, I haven't seen that they're saying anything too specific around justice involved, except for that use case. And anyone else can jump in if I'm missing anything, of course.
Thank you, Sayon, and thank you, Bill. Andrea, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And first of all, thank you to everybody who's been involved in this process for making this meeting today happen. It was a lot of information that was shared, and certainly I tried to take notes as best as possible, but I know, Cindy, you said that the PowerPoint you shared will be published on the website, and I was wondering, Andrea, if it would be possible to get access to your PowerPoint, but I also understand if it's not something that is ready to be shared. Something that I want to touch on, a couple points that came up for me while I listened to everybody sharing the information. So I certainly appreciate the work that's being done on the intercept model. I think that there are some great ideas, such as expanding the sobering centers, for example, providing reentry planning or services to individuals who spend less than 10 days in custody. Something that I can something that I want to highlight is the importance of this concept of care coordination and warm handoff. For example, somebody who goes into a sobering center, they might spend however much time there, 12 hours, 24 hours. I'm not super familiar with how these sobering centers operate. However, are we thinking about where that person goes after they leave the sobering center? Are they receiving assistance with connecting to other services when they leave the sobering center? Who's assisting them? To what extent are they being assisted? Those are questions that come up for me, and not just for sobering centers, but frankly, for any and all services that are provided, be that intensive outpatient, residential, mental health clinics, literally any service that's being provided to all individuals in the county. How can we strengthen care coordination between providers? It's been an ongoing topic for many years. And are there any steps, strategic steps, that the county can take to improve care coordination between providers? It's a very dire need. I think the better we can get as providers at care coordination, the better we get at making sure that individuals actually connect to the next provider, social service provider, treatment provider, whatever it might be, the more successful a client may ultimately be. The other point I want to touch on briefly is that, and it comes back to the data sharing, and I was wondering if there is an opportunity perhaps to review in the future opportunities for providers to review data analysis with their respective core or with other departments in the county, because providers provide a lot of data to the county. I mean, just for the services I oversee, we submit quarterly status reports, we submit separate monthly reports to county departments, we submit data to the sheriff's department, but there's never a comprehensive exchange about what that data show, what they can tell us about how good or bad we provide services. And I think that could be an opportunity for both county as well as providers to really look at what works and what doesn't work as far as the data collection and analysis is concerned. And I have a lot more to say, but this was a great presentation today from everybody. So thank you so much for sharing all this information.
Thank you, Andrea. I don't see any more hands.
Octavio, sorry, this is the Andrea. I was wondering if you could, oh, I see Darwin's hand up. I'd rather Darwin go first. I can wait.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. Darwin.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just want to add, I appreciate this discussion. But it's funny because my other hat, I'm a professor, but I worry that the discussion's too abstract and too much part about the data. If that was simply the case, a lot of these issues would not exist in the first place. And for that matter, to the extent that data is an issue, it obviously means someone's not sharing it. There's invested interest in the data not being shared. So I just want to again highlight for me what motivated me and why I'm doing this work are the cases like Alfred Alongo. Someone's having a mental health crisis, having law enforcement come and then being killed within seconds. And we've had a lot of high profile cases like that. Anthony Carolino, his brother was killed, mental health crisis. Really questioned whether or not law enforcement was needed, certainly whether or not lethal force was needed. So that's part of it. We also know with the arrest, so for example, a lot of the arrests, and we talk about this in terms of the type of offenses and then them being processed and whether or not it's needed, things like diversion programs. So one of the things we talked about in ATI, and this was covered in UT, was a lot of, for City of San Diego, a lot of arrests for San Diego Police Department for unhoused community were not being pursued by the city attorney. In fact, they're just not pursuing the case at all, they're the charges. So that to me is a really great example of where clearly law enforcement and arrest model is absolutely not working. Those cases are not being prosecuted, not being pursued by the city attorney. Then it really questions, of course, what law enforcement's doing. It makes it seem like a hot waste of time if you're arresting people and those cases not being prosecuted. So I say that because it seems like there's a lot of room for improvement, a lot of room for reform. And for whatever reason, we have been stuck and we've not been able to move and make the changes that we need.
Thank you, Darwin. Andrea, wanna go ahead?
Sure. I was just, Octavio, going to ask if you could in your presentation, you had some points of like the main topics that were being discussed, and I was just wondering if you could share just that slide again. I had a question and I didn't write it down, and I'm hoping it'll
Sure.
come back to me if you share that really quickly.
See, do you have it handy or want me to?
I don't think it was this one. It was
It's the last one, Cindy. There you go.
okay. Okay, sorry, just 1 second. Well, I was just wondering if there was any, in regards to successful social enterprises, if there was, I see that the example is Delancey Street. I was wondering if there were other examples that have been discussed, and yeah, what part of the, I guess, what part of the intercept are you all considering these social enterprises? Is it, 0 through 5, or were these particularly, after someone is released?
Thank you, Andrea. And I think I'm gonna let Bill respond because some of these discussions happen in the best practices and future research group, which Bill is part of. So Bill, you want to go ahead?
Thanks. Hi, Andrea. So I wrote down, and I was gonna shoot you a sly message in chat. That bullet point was actually related to therapeutic communities. And the social enterprise aspect of that is just the financial model under which therapeutic communities are supported. And so people may be familiar with Delancey Street, which is in San Francisco, which is a therapeutic community. And the high level summary of what a therapeutic community is it's a place to live, learn, and work that everything that goes on in the community is designed to have a therapeutic value, right? And so another example that people may be less familiar with is called the Other Side Academy in Salt Lake City. And their information about how they work and how they provide that alternative to incarceration is a little bit more accessible than Delancey Street. So I would recommend that people just look up the Other Side Academy in Salt Lake City as a primer for that. But that's really the bullet point there was that in addition to models like collaborative courts or other alternatives, that the therapeutic community model is another one worth pursuing.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that explanation.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Andrea. Do you have more comments from the panelists?
There is an attendee that has
Yeah.
her hand up.
So Charlene.
Hi, I just kind of want to go off what Bill just mentioned right now. I had an opportunity to actually stay at Delancey Street and to see that from an operational standpoint, but also I had to work there alongside them as well, and to see how Delancey Street has grown from one house to a building and then all of those social enterprises, and it's been successful. But what I do know is San Diego tried to open a Delancey Street tried to come here to San Diego. It was actually in Imperial Beach, I think around the 80s, late 80s, but it was shut down by NIMBA. So just a little comment on Bill's.
Thank you, Charlene. Cindy, do you think we can open for members of the audience to ask our questions?
Yeah, so we have a half hour left. I know there's been a lot of discussion. It looks like we have about half the advisory group members here today, and we've heard from some of them. Does anybody else want to ask any questions of the working group before we open it up to members of the public, or do the working group members have any questions they'd like to ask the advisory group? Because if not, now I see a couple hands in the attendee list. We can open up and give those individuals an opportunity to speak if they'd like to. Okay. Okay, Octavia.
So we have Cheryl. Can you open Cheryl's mic, please? Cheryl, I think you can talk now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm hearing you talk about justice involved. I have two sons who suffer mental illness and are justice involved. But I'm wondering, is there any plans to improve the quality of mental health care in the prisons for the prisoners? Because I see a lot of loopholes in the treatment plan, and not really sure that there is a treatment plan being followed or and my son was beaten when he was in a mental health crisis, and that only devastated him and caused a decline in his functioning and his mental health overall. And I'm just wondering, is there any plans to improve that mental health care in the prisons?
Thank you, Cheryl. Do you think we should open to other questions first and then we open for discussion?
Yes, I don't know if there's anyone on the working group who wants to answer any questions from the public. Prisons are, I'm probably getting too caught up in semantics as a state, which is outside the county's purview, unless you're talking about local.
Oh,
Through AB
we're talking about county.
Yeah, so so the focus here is on the county and alternatives to incarceration, but we are going to document your notes in the minutes. And again, we value you taking the time to get on here and share your thoughts. And we do have two individuals from Behavioral Health Services, which do oversee mental health services in the county of San Diego and through the community. So I don't know if Nicole or Sayon might want to say anything about what work BHS is doing and focusing there before we move on to the next question. I don't want to put you on the spot because I know.
Okay. Thank you.
I think I could just comment, Cheryl, again, this is Nicole Esposito from County Behavioral Health. We don't have any specific purview over the services, even at our local jails, but just acknowledging and recognizing your comment, I think there is, a sort of national movement and also local movement really to improve the availability, accessibility, and quality of mental health services. I don't think anybody would shy away from that being the intention.
Okay. I am a part of, I do participate in the CCJBH council, and they're very helpful. But are they state? Are they state?
I'm not familiar with the group, so I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
But thank you.
Yes, they are. Cheryl, they are state.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're helpful. Okay, I was just wondering.
Thank you so much, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Lila has a hand raising. Lila, want to go ahead?
And forgive me if I'm misquoting the name. I was doing some preliminary research on it, but it is the group, I think I looked it up on SAMHSA, the Intercept. Hold on one moment, please, so I could say it. The sequential intercept model. That's what we're looking at, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I really want to look at some, and everything looks really good, but the really looking at some robust recommendations under the peer models. And I know that the peer support people, I know that there's a credentialing that can be done at the state level, and kind of planning that and looking at best practices. I think that's a very good recommendation for the Zero community services. So that doesn't put a person in jail. And there's other ways to contact these people and things of that nature. Like you said, there could be marketing, different things of that nature, but also the jails and courts and reentry. I really want to look at how we get people out of jail faster. And I think that some of the best practices and the recommendations are linking them to some of these reentry providers and the different services. It's going to be individualized. But I think that handoff between the jail, and I know there's some programs doing great work, but the system period where everyone in that system is able to benefit, that handoff is a recommendation that I would be looking at to a community provider. And that would enhance public safety and would also minimize the time spent in jail. And if we look at different entry points of that would be, of course, booking, it could be arraignment, it could be during follow-up, but the court proceedings take a long time. And sometimes people are just wallowing in jails and they're rotting in jails where they could be in the community getting the services that they need, which would really enhance public services. So looking at this model, but really taking a robust look at the peer support and then that linkage with the reentry providers, I think is going to be very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Layla. And we have Jerry Hall from the audience.
Okay, hi there, everybody. Thank you. This has been a great meeting to witness. I just wanted to put a plug in for when Dr. T was talking about the longitudinal data, that we also include recommendations that, you know, even if we're not beginning to do it, something that would be on the roadmap would be the longitudinal data from the youth's perspective and their from their childhood up until the time they entered into the system, and then also the post discharge. So once they're off paper and off probation, we tend to just not track anybody after that, and we lose all the information of what people do that are successful and what people do that end up back up in prison or jail. So if this, you know, because we are talking about the ATI, if it's, you know, I think that one of the biggest focuses should be closing the pipeline of people coming into the system. And the way to do that would be to address the juvenile, you know, entry points and also the recidivism. The second thing is that, well, I also think that would be a great opportunity for funding if you came in and were recommending, you know, some creative way of tracking offenders when they're off paper. You know, give them $100 a month and ask them to answer 20 questions a month on a phone app, or, you know, some kind of creative way of learning what they're doing after they get off the paper would be really valuable. And I'm thinking that would be a creative solution that might attract some funding. And the second thing is the technology recommendations. I think when you are running across things that are just seem like insurmountable barriers, it might help to at least make a recommendation that, boy, it'd be great if we had this or that, and let the entrepreneurs out there, you know, answer that call. So I think if we see obvious data opportunities or publishing opportunities or software apps, things that we need, it seems like it'd be a good thing to at least list the idea and let the market take it from there. So I'll leave it with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Layla, want to go next?
I just have a question. The model that was presented for us, is this the model that the county has said we're implementing this, or is this a possible recommendation?
Andrea, you want to?
Are you asking about the sequential intercept model?
Yes, I am.
So that's just what we are using to guide us in brainstorming and determining recommendations we can make to the board for different services and supports that we think might help create alternatives to incarceration. So I think that I don't know that the board has adopted the intercept model, but I know they are familiar with it. We've definitely discussed it in our returns to the board and in memos that we've done to the board. So they're aware that we are using this model to guide our work.
Are you asking Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Are you asking that the board adopt this model at some point, or it's just going to be guiding? That's as far as you guys are going with it.
It's guiding our recommendations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Leila, and thank you, Andrea. We have Tom Packard from the audience. Tom?
Yeah, can you hear me? I just hit unmute.
Yes, we can hear
Yeah.
it.
My name's Tom Packard. I'm with Showing Up for Racial Justice North County. I'm a little bit new to this. I observed one of your August meetings and I read some of the background documents, and actually I have two questions. I'll ask my process question first, and then later, if there's time for my second one, that'll be great. It looks like you're doing really impressive work, all of the research and everything that Sandag's doing and the groups and what they're doing. And I'm encouraged. It looks like you're having more and more involvement from the community members in addition to the county people and Sandag. My question is, what are you doing to kind of merge everything as things are going now, and then how that'll merge into your final recommendations? For example, I know that the Sandag research partly is looking at national best practices, and I think one of the advisory groups is looking at best practices. So I guess my question is, what's your process for making sure that all of the pieces that you're working on now are being shared so that you don't get a surprise at the end where people put in their individual products and they don't really fit? And then just to underline a hope I have is that out of all of your work, you will be able to have some really actionable recommendations for the Board of Supervisors. It looks like they really want that. So I think it'd give the community a little sense of confidence to know that how all your pieces are fitting together in terms of the way the different groups are sharing what they have, so that the final product will be good.
Tom, thank you so much for the work you're doing and for joining us here and in the past. So when we are putting together the data for the report, we share it with the advisory group members, and we're sharing it with the working group members. When we put this draft report together, we want to tie things together. So we're going to be tying it back to the research questions, but if you looked at our last report, the second intercept report, when we did the community survey, we tried to bring in where the advisory group, for example, had given us feedback. We tried to really bring in the comments and make recommendations again that are actionable. So we want to weave data together to see the story. We want to give it to the advisory group and the working group a chance to weigh in on that. And there, of course, going to be times where there may not be consensus on different things. And that's why we want to give the advisory group and the working group a chance to add an addendum to our report so that they have a voice there if they have a different perspective that they think that wasn't reflected in the Sandag and our contracted work. So we want to make sure that voices are heard there. So we want to have transparency, which is why we've been putting every comment out that we get without editing it, but also trying to look at what's that story and weaving the background and experiences of the advisory group along with the working group, who have a lot of direct knowledge of how the services are providing or the system cases might work through. So that's our goal. Once we had that draft report out in December, we envision sharing it with the community, and we're going to have 2 more community forums, which we're going to be going to the advisory group and working group and trying to make sure we get as widespread participation as we can. And then we're hoping that the community in those forums can help see the data that we have together and then offer additional insights that potentially we could bring into that final report.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Tom. I don't see any other hands. Andrea.
Yes, thank you. Octavio, I just thought of a different question that kind of has been in the back of my mind for a long time, but I never get a chance to ask it. But I see we have Dan Grubbs here from the San Diego Police Department. Hi, Dan, and thank you for joining tonight. And
hello.
I have a question that is more specifically tailored to the efforts of the San Diego Police Department in supporting this work around alternatives to incarceration. decreasing jail population, reducing recidivism. So if I understand correctly, I would imagine that most of your efforts are concentrated, obviously, at the initial stages of the intercept model, 0 to 1, law enforcement, well, probably, presumably, mainly law enforcement, outside of transferring individuals that your officers come into contact with to sobering centers. Does the police department engage in any other efforts to support this work? And I would really love to hear more about that.
Yes, depending on the person we're contacting, if it's from a radio call, calls for service, a business owner, a citizen, a concerned person, a person in the unhoused community, calling saying they're being assaulted or there's been a crime against them, we come out, we try to contact the individuals involved. Every incident is unique, and we try to get both sides of the story, look at all the evidence, but we always offer services before taking enforcement action. It's always our desire to offer services and have people take us up on services where appropriate. Now, if there's $10,000 in damage and we have a business owner demanding action being taken, that's a little different because now we're into a felony. But like for a lot of these minor crimes, it can be urinating in public, defecating in front of a business. And the ones where you're actually seeing us take action are the ones where we have somebody demanding you take action, or it's a repeated person. Chief Nislight has directed us to, hey, your first time you contact the person for these lesser offenses, we do a field interview. The second time you contact them, you can write an infraction citation, a misdemeanor citation, before we're actually going to have to make an custodial arrest. And at every one of these, we're going to offer them services. Would you like to, to get into a shelter? Would you like to work your way home to where you're actually, where you're from? Because a lot of our unhoused population isn't from San Diego. But again, they come here because it's easier to be homeless here, or there's a lot of generous people in San Diego who do offer services or to feed them. So those are some of the things we're doing. It's very difficult. The process to book somebody into jail from the time we contact them to actually getting to San Diego PD headquarters into jail, it can be 3.5 hours depending on what division they're from. So if we have an inebriated person that we can get into a sobering center in about 15 minutes, we would much rather do that with them than have to book them into jail. So we're not looking to get them in the system, but believe me, there's so many cases going on, for example, down in Central Division with our finite resources in regards to our staffing, that we're triaging. If we're having to take somebody into custody for being inebriated in public, they're the source of at least one call for service, if not multiple. And we're probably ignoring 3 other people, in that area, oftentimes on that block. They're inebriated too, but this is the one who's attacking the other unhoused people, or he's running out into traffic and causing problems. So I've been talking for a long time, but I'm happy to answer any other specific questions you may have. But it's we would always rather not put somebody in jail if there's another alternative, because they're usually quicker and it does get them to services.
Sure. Thank you so much for providing this overview. I have just one quick follow-up question because I see Tom has his hand up again, which is, do you collect data to where you're able to say we diverted this % of the contacted population into, say, sobering centers or other services, as opposed to taking them into custody?
So specifically our neighborhood policing division, who is designed to be the tip of this, the tip of the contacting point with the unhoused population, they do. They have groups like our HOT teams, our homeless outreach teams that specifically go out there and do that. All of their teams do exactly as you described. I can tell you honestly, as the captain of a patrol division, our 9 patrol divisions, they don't capture that information. I mean, they just go case by case basis. They are the generalists handling so many different kinds of radio calls, from shootings, vehicle pursuits, collisions, that they don't necessarily track that data.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Andrea. And Tom, I'm sorry I cut you off. You said you had 2 questions and I completely forgot the second one. So you want to go ahead and ask your second question?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm happy to wait. I didn't want to crowd in line. This one's about, it's kind of building on Darwin's earlier point about people with mental illnesses that end up dying. And one of my fixations these days is data integration. And some of us have been talking to supervisor staff and the sheriff and the Behavioral Health Advisory Board. And my fixation is the data integration between the law enforcement data from their CAD system and how they do the screening for whether they can refer somebody to the MCRT, and then those pieces of data, and then when a referral gets made from a 911 call to the MCRT, following up with the county's data system with their contract agency so that we can see that those data are linked. And I know Dr. T did a presentation at the BHAB. I missed that part of that meeting, and I'll get up to speed on that. But I guess I just wanted to see if you're attending to that. I think evaluating the MCRT is going to have to involve knowing how the 911 dispatchers either screened in or screened out people so that we can know what happened to those people if they didn't go to MCRT or PERT, and then the ones that went into it. And I think that'll, obviously, you can see the connection there with alternatives to incarceration if people are screened out to the MCRT, but making sure that the ones that are getting screened to the MCRT are appropriate, and the ones that are not allowed to MCRT are also clearly non-appropriate.
I can start to respond if that's okay. So thank you, Tom. I'll say that in terms of that data integration and care coordination board letter response that I talked about. So currently we're just figuring out where we are. Right. And then, but the next step is definitely to think about where can we go, what potential, how do we dream about this, and then of course we have to figure out what our barriers, et cetera. But I will say that the topic of MCRT and access to, the PSAP or the 911 data has definitely come up in multiple meetings that I've been at in terms of hearing feedback. And that's something, we're planning, I think I briefly mentioned that we're planning to integrate use cases into our 270-day report back to the board, which may be a presentation. But in that, we are considering having MCRT be one of those use cases. I cannot guarantee anything, where we need to explore that, but so that is one area where we might use that to highlight some of the opportunities and challenges currently, that affords us.
Yeah, thanks. That's encouraging. And I know that some of these are outside your control. The sheriff, of course, is part of the county, but doesn't need to do what the board wants. And I know there are all the other law enforcement jurisdictions that have all their dispatch systems. So that we're just hoping that as much as possible, the people that are in roles like you all are in can encourage those systems, especially the law enforcement jurisdictions, to really work hard to share with the community how they're doing, specifically how they're doing that MCRT screening. So maybe if you all have a voice to the extent that you can share that with the other law enforcement jurisdictions, that would be appreciated. So thanks again, Dr. T. I like and appreciate the work you're doing on this.
And just a quick comment also, again, Nicole Esposito from Behavioral Health Department. In our work with MCRT and the development, the law enforcement jurisdictions that are working with us have been really fantastic partners. We have, initial MOU, we have relationships. So those things are in the works, lots to be developed that you're pointing us to. But I want to make sure that everybody's aware that all the jurisdictions that are partnering with us are definitely at the table and very interested to achieve the same aims.
Thank you, Sayon and Nicole and Tom again. We still have 9 minutes of time scheduled. I don't see more questions from the audience, but I don't know if somebody from the panelists want to add something. Holly.
Hi, everyone. Holly Porter, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Public Safety for the County of San Diego. I just wanted to say hello and really thank the members of the advisory committee for the time that they are investing in this work. And there were several things I was taking notes as all of you were talking, and I think that we're aligned really on a lot of the things that I heard and the concerns that we have and the priorities that were voiced. Dr. Fishman asked that we look at areas where people perhaps are arrested but not prosecuted. Some of the initial conversations with the working group were around, what are those charges where people maybe are booked and released from jail, don't spend much time there, low-level nonviolent misdemeanors. And so we really coalesced around some of the encroachment, public intoxication types of charges, and agreed that that was an area to focus on, to see what we could do to, to keep people perhaps in a community environment or resource rather than going to county jail. And I heard Andrea talk about care coordination and the importance of sort of follow-up. And that's also been a big topic for us as part of the working group. If we're looking at alternatives to incarceration, whether it's crisis stabilization units or sobering services, or care, different types of diversionary courts, what are the things that we're doing to make sure that those individuals, when they leave those resources, are connected to ongoing care? And so I just heard a lot of themes that are really, I think, common between the advisory group and the working group. And just to let you know, from our perspective, we are very committed to incorporating feedback, and that your feedback's really meaningful to us. And so just want to say thanks again for the time that you're taking to invest in the work.
Thank you, Holly. Amanda Berry from the audience.
Thank you, Octavio. This is Amanda Berry. I am a policy advisor for Supervisor Tara Lawson-Reamer, District 3. And Supervisor Lawson-Reamer authored both of the board letters that we're talking about this evening for alternatives to incarceration and data governance and integration. And I want to echo what Holly said and just thank everybody for your time and commitment towards developing recommendations back to the Board of Supervisors for how to safely and permanently reduce our jail population through services and supports that help people get well and recover and stay out of our jails. So thank you so much for all of your work. You have the support of the supervisor. We realize that this is such cross-cutting work, evidenced by the number of organizations and departments and jurisdictions that are participating through the working group and the advisory group. So really appreciate the ability to integrate workflows and collaborate together through this call and other many conversations to develop solutions that we look forward to those recommendations back to the board for things that we should be investing in from the Board of Supervisors. So thanks everyone for your participation.
Thank you, Amanda. Bill, you're next.
Thanks. I don't want to be the guy who brings the depressing close to the meeting after everybody's saying thank you and everything, but I just wanted to bring a point of view that we've talked a lot about data integration and longitudinal studies and things like that. And we also know that a lot of the research questions that were brought forth by the board were sort of stymied by a lack of data and the systems to manage that. And so that points out to the consultant in me, which I used to be, that there's a missing piece of what I'll call organizational capability. Because if we had that capability from a way we're all working together, we would have the data to answer the questions that were put forth. And so, since Holly is here, I think that that organizational capability belongs in the administrative office at the county. And I think that the commercial world or the corporate world has designed and developed some governance frameworks that will serve all of us well. And I really feel like if we shoot for longitudinal, cross-functional and cross-agency government and non-government data, we're looking at years and years and years of IT projects and things like that. And I just think there's some things we can do in the short term around synchronizing needs, risk and needs assessments, and going all the way up to common data structures without the personally identifiable information. It'll get us 80% of the benefit. And we should look short term and get the 80% rather than wait 10 years to get the 95%.
I hear you. Thank you for that perspective. Don't let perfect stand in the way of good. I hear that loud and clear and couldn't agree with you more. And I think Dr. Seon would agree with that as well. So we'll definitely take that advice as we're looking at the recommendations, the final recommendations back to the board. You know, what are the evaluation data? What are the quick wins that we can get to that are going to help drive this forward? So I agree with you 100%.
Thank you, Bill and Holly. Andrea.
Thanks, Octavio. I know we only have 2 minutes left, so I just wanted to be quick. I just really wanted to not only thank the advisory group members who are on here. Thank you very much for your time that you put into this project and for being here today. But I also really wanted to thank the working group members who are also here today, who also put in a significant amount of time into this project. They meet monthly, more than monthly, some of them. And so I just really want to thank them also for being on the call today. And we look forward to continue collaboration with you all. And as Holly said, there is a lot of, crossover themes that we've been sharing, and I think we will come back with really great recommendations. So thank you again to everybody who's here tonight.
Thank you very much, Andrea. We are hitting the 6 o'clock mark, but I see one other question from the audience. So if you don't have any problem with it, I'll let Layla Maddox to ask a question.
Hi, just more of a comment. I'm Layla Maddox. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for the Regional Task Force on Homelessness. We're the continuum of care for the San Diego City and County. And I just want to acknowledge that we've been participating in a lot of the conversations. So we appreciate Dr. T and some of our other partners on this call, including us, as we know that about 1/4 of the jail population report being unsheltered homeless prior to entering into jail. So I just want to acknowledge that we're participating and starting to get more and more involved in some of these work groups and various conversations. So we're happy to participate and contribute, again, recognizing that there are percentages of people experiencing homelessness with behavioral health and reentry and jail population. So happy to participate in any other conversations moving forward, and anything that we can make recommendations, as we do have our regional plan that just came out that includes the justice sector as well, and a conference the end of November and early December. So definitely having this ongoing conversation. And want to do one more comment regarding lived expertise. We know that there has been a lot more inclusion, but want to make sure that these work groups and conversations include folks with lived expertise specifically as their insight, and can really help inform these conversations and these recommendations. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Lahela. Cindy, you want to close this meeting?
Yeah, no, just again, thank you, everybody. Just to reiterate what everybody else said, I do think that we've gotten some good notes. All the PowerPoints will be posted to the website along with this video. Lincoln will be putting some minutes together and look forward to continuing to work with you all. If you are new to this group and you're not on our ETI mailing list, you can send an email to atistudy@sandag.org, and we'll make sure that you're kept up to date on when meetings are happening and reports are coming out. And we look forward to to pulling this all together and getting your input as we prepare for our final push into March of 2023. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Good
Thank you very
night.
much. Have a good night.
Thank you.